You are listening to the Room 1202 podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Room 1202 podcast. If this is your first time here, my name is Mar, and I'm genuinely grateful that you found your way here today. Whether you've been listening since the beginning or this episode somehow found you, I hope you leave this conversation with at least one idea that stays with you long after it's over. Over the past season, we've spent a lot of time talking about formation before influence, right? We explored why our inner world matters, why paying attention matters, why the voices we listen to matter, and why God seems to care so deeply about the way He forms us before He entrusts us with greater responsibility. The more I reflected on those conversations, the more I realized that formation was never the destination. It was always the beginning, because once something begins to change within us, it naturally changes the way we see everything around us. And I think that's where I want this next season to begin. Not by asking, what should I believe? But by asking a different question. How did I learn to think the way I do? I don't think we ask ourselves that question often enough, honestly. We spend so much time collecting information that we rarely stop to examine the lens through which we're interpreting it. And maybe that's why this season feels so important to me, guys. I've decided to call it Learning to Think Like Heaven. Now, before that sounds like a phrase that's only meant for church, which is not, let me explain what I mean, guys. I'm not talking about becoming less rational or replacing difficult questions with easy answers. Actually, I think the opposite is true. I think genuine faith should make us more intellectually honest, more curious, more willing to wrestle with complexity, more comfortable saying, I don't know yet. Because I've always believed that truth has nothing to fear from sincere curiosity. Whether truth is explored through science, philosophy, psychology, history, or scripture, truth remains truth. And if something is genuinely true, then we shouldn't be afraid to examine it carefully, right? I love something C.S. Lewis once wrote. He said, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it, I see everything else. That's so beautiful. I don't think a renewed mind is simply about believing different things, guys. I think it's about learning to see reality differently. So whether you've been following Jesus for years, you're still exploring faith, or you're simply someone who enjoys asking meaningful questions about life, purpose, and what it means to be human, I hope this becomes a place where you feel welcome. Not because I have all the answers. I definitely don't. I mean, I wish I have. But because I think some of the most meaningful conversations begin when we're willing to ask better questions together. And that's exactly where I'd like to begin today. There's a question that has been sitting with me for the last few weeks. Actually, maybe even longer than that. Have you ever wondered why two intelligent people can actually look at exactly the same situation and come away believing completely different things? I don't just mean having different opinions, guys. I mean genuinely seeing two different realities. One person walks through failure and becomes cynical. Another walks through something remarkably similar and somehow becomes wiser. One person builds success and becomes generous. Another builds success and becomes consumed by it. One person experiences criticism and hears an invitation to grow. Another hears rejection. The circumstances may be almost identical. The interpretation isn't. And I think that's fascinating, because the more I've thought about it, the more I've started wondering if our lives are shaped less by what happens to us and more by the meaning we attach to what happens to us. That thought actually has stayed with me, especially because we're living in a generation that has access to more information than any generation before us. Think about it. If I wanted to learn astrophysics, for example, tonight, right? I probably could. If I wanted to understand Renaissance art, neuroscience, or Japanese philosophy, there are lectures, books, podcasts, documentaries, and AI tools that I could use to help me get started almost immediately. I don't think previous generations could have imagined living in a world like this. And honestly, I don't see technology as something we should automatically fear. Well, I use AI almost every day in my work. I love reading psychology. I enjoy philosophy because it forces me to slow down and examine my assumptions. Science actually, continually leaves me in awe because every new discovery reminds me how intricate reality really is. So, this isn't a conversation about choosing faith instead of science or curiosity instead of conviction. I don't think those are the choices we have to make. The question that's been sitting with me is much simpler. Why do we have more information than ever before, yet wisdom still feels surprisingly rare? The more I think about it, the more I realize that perhaps the greatest challenge of our generation isn't that we're uninformed. It's that we're overwhelmed. Every single day, we are absorbing thousands of ideas, opinions, headlines, algorithms, videos, podcasts, and conversations. Some of them are true. Some of them are not. Most of them are trying to tell us what success looks like and what happiness looks like, what we should fear, what we should desire, and even who we should become. After a while, it's easy to forget that every voice we repeatedly listen to is quietly teaching us how to see the world. And maybe that's why I've become so fascinated by this idea of renewing the mind, guys. For a long time, I thought it simply meant replacing bad thoughts with good ones. Now I'm beginning to think it's much deeper than that. Maybe renewal isn't just about changing our conclusions. Maybe it's about changing the way we arrive at those conclusions in the first place. Maybe God isn't only interested in what we believe. Maybe He's patiently restoring the very way we perceive reality. If that's true, then curiosity isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to steward. Questions aren't the opposite of faith, guys. Sometimes they're the beginning of a deeper one. And I think that's why I keep coming back to Romans 12:2. Paul doesn't begin with behavior. He begins with the mind, and he writes, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed with the renewing of your mind." I've read that verse many times, but lately I've been wondering if Paul wasn't simply telling us to think different thoughts. Maybe he is inviting us into an entirely different way of thinking, a way of seeing, a way of interpreting, a way of living. Maybe that's what this season is really about. Not collecting more ideas, guys, but learning how to see more truthfully. Not becoming the smartest person in the room, becoming the kind of person whose mind is being continually shaped by truth, humility, wisdom, and ultimately by God Himself. So I'm going to leave you with the same question I've been asking myself over the past few weeks, actually. Not what do I think, but who or what is teaching me how to think? I don't think that's a question we answer in 5 minutes, though. I think it's a question we live with, maybe for weeks, maybe years, and maybe that's okay. Because the goal of this podcast has never been to rush you towards answers. It's always been to help us become the kind of people who are willing to pursue truth with humility, courage, and wonder. And I have a feeling that's exactly where wisdom begins. So, thank you so much for spending time with me today. If this conversation gave you something to think about, I'd genuinely love to hear what stayed with you. You can leave a comment, send me a message, or share this episode with someone who enjoys asking meaningful questions about life, purpose, and what it means to be human. If you're joining me for season 2, thank you for coming back. I really believe this season is going to challenge us, guys, stretch us, and hopefully help us to see the world with a little more clarity. Until next time, stay curious, stay humble, and keep seeking what is true. I'll meet you back here in room 1202 podcast.